Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And my guest today is Robert Silano. He is an expert in MEP Consulting, which stands for Mechanical, Electrical, and Plumbing. When I first saw that, even though I should know it, I didn't, so I had to go and take a look at it. Been in business for 43 years, so we're going to really tap into his wisdom about some of the lessons that he's learned along the way. So let's bring Robert on. Hey, Robert, how are you today?
How you doing? Good.
I'm doing well, thank you. So, I don't know if you want to answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyhow.
Sure.
What is the biggest mistake you wish you had never made, and why was it the biggest mistake?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, I think early on was probably one of the largest mistakes, which is not getting things in writing. A little too much trust. And as time evolved, you learn that the way society is now, you really can't do that. You have to have things in writing. You have to have a contract. The trust factor, unfortunately, has dissolved over time.
Well, why do you think that's happened?
It's become a very liturgic society. So, um, also, it has a lot to do with risk and insurance. So, a lot of people, a lot of companies that you work with, they're trying to mitigate their risk. So, everything goes into a lengthy contract that has to be read. And they put restrictions. I want to say restrictions, but they put milestones on you that could be sometimes irreasonable, or clauses in there that are not written by people in the industry, but are written by attorneys and insurance people, and they just don't understand how this kind of business works. So one of the best things is, read your contracts, red line if necessary. If you don't have that acumen, send it to someone with a legal background in contracts. The devil is in the details when it comes to that, especially more now than ever before.
So I would probably add to that. I said, if possible, write the contract that you guys use. So it's your
Mhm.
contract, not theirs.
Yeah, well, even when we send out proposals, which are considered a binding contract,
Yeah.
they they accept the price. They sort of dismiss your letter, and you get a 25-page document to sign with a lot of clauses and liquidated damages, and that's the binding contract. And unfortunately, a lot of contractors will they fall for the carrot on the stick. They don't worry about the contract. Oh, we won the job. Let's sign away. Yeah, well, you might have signed away to something you can't afford to accomplish. So sometimes it's better to let one go than to um, wind up with a job that you did just for charity.
Yeah, real estate developers, or some real estate developers, are known for stiffing their subs.
Yeah, and
And
that comes down to a lot of developers require and use financing from banks and from lending institutions, and they don't get their money until certain progress is made. So everything is worked on a progress payment schedule: 5%, 10% of the job, 15%, and then now there's an introduction of a third party who then comes out to the site besides the bank and sees if that is actually done. Those percentages are real. So you could have payments that are held up. You could be 25% into the job, but the bank and the third party are saying 20. Now, 5% on a $10 million job is quite a bit of money over a month's period that
yeah,
you are now not having in your coffers and have to lay out for material and for labor.
makes sense to me. So my biggest mistake was I thought that growing my sales was more important than growing my profits. And
Ah.
I didn't pay attention to the profits, and they eventually disappeared as my
Mhm.
sales kept growing and my expenses kept rising.
Yeah, that's the double-edged sword about becoming successful. You have to know when to pump the brakes. You can go out there and pretty much win almost any job you want with a really good price or a low price, but as you get busier, your overhead climbs, and your price has to reflect that.
Yeah, I find that a lot of business owners, they think that, and there's a reason for this, is that when you start your business, you need to create revenue. That's the
Yes.
number one thing you need to do is create revenue. But you get to a point, maybe it's $1 million in business, maybe it's a $500,000 in business, where
Mhm.
you're creating enough revenue to fill your needs. Then you need to start focusing on what drives profit. Maybe it is more sales. Maybe it's raising your prices. Maybe
Mhm.
it's being more efficient in how you provide the work that you do. Those are all things that are things I never focused on. I was in business for 8 or 10 years and had a couple of near-death experiences where we came close to bankruptcy. So,
Of course.
like many of us, I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. I mean, at one point, we had a company that we brought down to literally the expense per minute, and by 7:15 a.m., we made a determination if one of our fleet of trucks was leaving or not, based on how much the ROI was on that truck leaving the facility to do a job. And the rule was by 7:15, if that truck wasn't ready to go, the wheels didn't hit the pavement, it stood in, and we rescheduled for the next day. Because already by 7:15, that project is 15 minutes or 20 minutes behind schedule, and that 20 minutes had a factor of X, and that would be the crew, the material going out there, the overhead. So all that has to, you really have to calculate things almost down to your cost per minute. And when you structure a deal, your overhead and you also have your profit margin. The minute you start losing profit out of your margin and starting to nibble away at your overhead, that should be the red flag. There's a definite problem if you're starting to go into your overhead because now you're just doing it for free at the point where you hit the overhead margin. And once you get into the overhead margin, now you're losing money. That's the point where you lose. So if you can imagine a dial that goes from green to red, red is you're into your overhead, yellow is you're approaching it, and green is you're still working with your profit margin intact.
So that's a really good point. So let's dive into that for a minute. In that people will say, well, it covers some overhead. And
That
I hear that. What it means to me is you're subsidizing that particular job that you're doing for your
Right.
customer. And why would you ever do that?
Your overhead doesn't sometimes get paid. Your overhead is like clockwork. Rent gets paid, insurance get paid, people have payroll. Um, that's a static, and it constantly increases over the year. Um, that once you figure what your overhead cost is and you blend it into a project or several projects, it can't get away from. If you start diving into it, you're doomed to fail. You
Yeah.
know, because it's also the cost of money. Today's dollar 3 weeks from now is probably worth about 75 cents. You need the money now because when you're buying supplies, you have a 30-day term possibly with your supplier. And when that 30 days is up and you need to buy more supplies every week, they're expecting to get paid. And if you're behind with your project and they're not getting paid, that supply chain could get shut off on you, which will then cause delays, which is going to cost you even more in the long run.
The thing that I always find interesting is that, well, it'll cover some overhead for me, so I need to take that job because I've got a crew and I don't want them just sitting around. And what I say to them at that point is say, well, here's the problem that you have. You have a sales problem. You don't have a delivery problem right now. You might have a delivery problem, but
Mhm.
I can tell you your immediate problem was a sales problem. So
Right.
whatever you do to create business at a particular margin, you need to change that right now, or
Yep.
you're going to be out of business. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And with the type of business I've been in, the kind of the rule of thumb, I mean, when you're starting out, you want to have at least three jobs rolling, projects rolling at a time. And you don't want them all starting at the same time. So you want them to sort of feather into each other where one starts today, one starts 30 days from now, one starts 60. so that when they end, and hopefully by then your sales force or wherever you get your sales has another job lined up, so that the first set of people start falling into that one, the second starts falling into the next job. So it starts a cycle of everybody continues to work. Of course, you're going to upsize and downsize based on project size. Um, but if you have a single project that you're going after, and you throw, all your eggs in one basket, and then when that project starts slowing down, now what do you do? So the sales cycle has to continuously be there, but it also has to be timed properly. You try not to take on too many jobs at once, and then within, depending on the duration of the job, let's say 6 months, on the seventh month you have nothing. You can hear a pin drop in the office. That's not what you want to have. You want to strategically go after jobs on a certain time frame.
So this kind of leads into one of my favorite topics, which is why you need a good dashboard in your business. And,
Absolutely.
and for me, a dashboard isn't necessarily my profit and loss and balance sheet. All those are important to
Hmm.
look, but they don't tell me anything about what's going to happen in the future. What will happen in the future is how much do I have in backlog?
Yep.
What kind of proposals am I putting out? What percent of my proposals are closing? What's the margin we're getting on our proposals when we put them out versus what's the margin we actually get when we do the job? If you're doing a fixed price, you should be able to beat what your margin is you thought it would be through, methods of being more efficient. And those are all good things to do. But if you don't know what's going to happen in the future in your business, and you find your backlog dries up and you're not even aware of it, well, that's a bad day.
Yeah, you definitely didn't have your hand on the pulse of your own company if that happens.
Yeah.
um, there is software out there that, as you get larger in scale, that'll help you manage that. It's a significant investment, but if you're starting out, these are the things you have to do manually, and it may be something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet and a little bit of math. You also have to look at what's
It's,
important is competition.
yeah.
Competition drives you in one way or the other. It'll either make you more profitable or less profitable. You have to know what your competition's doing, what they're selling at, and kind of gauge what their overhead is. The larger companies have obviously more overhead, but they have a lot of work. So it kind of dilutes their overhead. So if you're trying to compete with them, it's pretty hard because you have a larger nut to cover with less cash flow,
Well,
where they have a ton.
you can't compete with them anyhow because the bonding companies aren't going to bond you on a big job if you're a small company.
There are certain large jobs like right now. I very rarely do small ones. Mostly everything that we're doing now is in the millions to billions. And yeah, sometimes it's bonding, and there's a fee for that. Sometimes 2%, unless it's something called CSIP, which is you're self bonded or you're bonded together, and that's great. But there are downfalls to that as well, especially when you start looking at, like I said before, things that if you have a misstep, liquidated damages, um, that could take your business out from under you. If
Yes.
they have to remove you and hire someone else to finish, it's always going to be more expensive for that other company to finish, and they're going to back charge you. So the general contractor or the developer never loses.
Yeah.
They'll find somebody else to do it, and they'll just, legally put you into bankruptcy if they have to.
Yeah. Yeah. That happened in a very large project we were involved with several years ago. So
Hmm.
I understand your son is in business with you,
Yes.
and
Yep. He's been.
he's taking over the business from you.
Yes, he is. So he's been doing this now about 13 years. He was off from college one summer, and I said, "Well, you're going to come to work with me." And he was like, "I got the summer off." I said, "I never had a summer off." So he started from the bottom, kind of enjoyed it, worked his way up through the top, and quickly got into the management end of it. And he's considered one of the best estimators out there when it comes to electrical. So he's continuing to do that, and he serves the clients that we have very well. I mean, and he sees the fruit of his labor. Um, there's a big trend now of bringing back the trades, which I'm a pretty big believer in. College is not for everyone, but when you look at the return that you get, it's pretty incredible. You'll have someone that goes to school for college for 4 years, gets student loans, and winds up with maybe $100,000 worth of debt at the end, and gets a job for maybe 50, 60,000 to start. Whereas the trades, there is no student loan. And within a couple of years of just working in the length of college, you could be making 70, 80, 90,000. Some of my top foremen, make 150,000 a year, and they have no student loans, and they're living very well. And in my business, even the management, when you start passing the estimator side and the chief estimator side and go into project management, your senior project managers will make anywhere from 200 to $300,000 a year.
And they don't need a college degree for that either.
No, because to be honest, a lot of I mean, you should have some experience in, math is the most important thing. Let's just frankly say it, reading and math. You have to master those two skills, especially math.
Yeah,
Um,
I would actually say it's not math, it's arithmetic. Because all you're ever doing
arithmetic
is multiplying, dividing, adding,
and
and
adding your basics. I was never asked by a customer to give a price in a square root, so you're 100% right.
I mean, this is arithmetic, it's not math. And
No.
this is one of my biggest complaints with MBA programs is
Ah,
they try to make business in the math, and it's not. It's really just adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. It's really simple.
right. And basic accounting course. Your debit, your credit, your ledgers. As long as you have that under your belt, you're okay, and everything else falls into place.
So I'd like to move back to your son just for a few minutes if we
Mhm.
can. Did you have a problem where your son, when he first joined you, had an employee mentality, then over a period of time he developed an owner's mentality?
No, I didn't allow that ever to happen. That was always kept in check. When I came into this business, it was the same way, and my uncle brought me into this business. So at a young age, I learned I was the lowest on the totem pole, and I got all the crap work. And it didn't matter. I was the
Being
nephew.
an employee, not being an owner.
I was an employee, and then as my son developed more into being a partner with me, he does keep that attitude, from the old ways of doing things. Is he worries more about things than I do when it comes to bottom line.
Okay. Well, this is an issue I see a lot with rising generations,
Oh
is
yeah.
that they're really good at that, but they think of themselves as an employee, and
Hmm.
lots of reason to happen. And for a successful transition to happen, they have to develop an owner's mentality and stop that
Yep.
employee mentality, which means they have to think about what makes the business successful, not what makes them successful.
Well, the way I've done that, especially with him, was tying what we make into his salary.
Okay, that's a
So
really good move, by the way. That's
it's an
that's what
incentive
that's what they
program.
do. You give them a piece of the action, they start paying attention to the action.
Oh yeah. I mean, when you want to upgrade something or buy something, I get the question, do we really need that? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I got where you're coming from. Good. That was a good one.
So, have you started transferring ownership to your son yet?
Yes, I have.
So, can you talk about that process a bit?
Well, the process is fairly easy paperwork wise, but since we've been doing it together so long, and we obviously have the same last name, we kind of look a lot alike. Unfortunate for him, people already know him. So they understand the dynamic of the business, and they know to go to him if they want to get to me or vice versa. So it works out pretty well. Now that I'm going to be working for I would say, a significant period of time with a specific company, and he's going to take over the business. He has all the tools he needs to get things done. Of course, I'm not like Biden, where I'm going to say I only talk to my son about the weather. We are going to talk about business, and we're going to keep in touch with that. But he has a good handle on it. So as I make the transition to the other side, he'll be fine.
Cool. So are you gifting the business to them or are you selling the business to
Gifting.
them? Okay. And why did you decide to do that?
Well, because from the very beginning, slowly, when I incorporated the business, I started him off with shares in the business, and every year, knowing that this was going to be the end game, kept increasing his stake all the way up to where we were equal partners. And I generally have a good foresight on where I'm going in the next 3 years, so how things are going to change. And little by little, I was transitioning more and more to him, and then the rest of it was just gifted.
Cool. So this is a big decision point for folks who are transferring their business. Is
Hmm.
should I sell my business to my child or should I gift the business to my child? Now, if you're transferring your business to managers, that's a whole different ballgame. You're obviously going to
Yes.
sell and you
Yeah.
need to come up with a way, but there's arguments for both. And before you make that decision, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you talk to a professional about the pros and cons of both. Then
Okay.
you can make your own decision. I mean,
Hmm.
there are people who gift and it works perfectly well, and there are people who sell and does perfectly well, and I can give you the opposite on both sides of that too.
Yeah.
And it's really about what you want for your family. I happen to fall on the side you really should probably buy the business, but I can be convinced in certain instances that that's not the
Mhm.
right way to go.
Yeah.
So,
It has a lot to do with the relationship you have with the other person. If it's sort of, I don't want to say separated relationship, but it's strictly business reputation or relationship with them. Not that it's strained, but it's not as warm and fuzzy as it should be. Yeah, then you're talking a sale if they're interested in doing that. But since we've worked together so long and we're like part A and part B together, it was just a natural thing to happen. And eventually, I'll always be a mentor to him in terms and advisor to him in any which way I can,
right,
and I'll keep him on track. But he does it very well on his own, so I was really comfortable with that. And the new transition that I'm going to will just put me in a spot where I can really utilize the tools that I have gained over the years to on a very large scale.
right. Well, I ended up buying the business from my father, but that's, again, I won't do that, but it's just a different way of, transferring a business. There are lots of ways to skin that
Yeah,
cat.
of course.
So, Robert, unfortunately, we are out of time,
Hmm.
and your 43 years of experience just shines right through, and I appreciate it. How can people find you? Is there something you'd like them to do if they do find you?
Yeah, they can use the website, www.robertsolano.com. You'll see our website, you'll see contact information. I'll always have that email. I own the domain. That's one thing I didn't sell. So they can always reach me through there. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I have quite a bit of followers and I do post. I'm very active on it because I keep in touch with my business community that way.
Cool, cool. I've got two things I'd like you to do. The first I've asked 400 and some odd times, which means if you're counting, I've been doing this podcast for over 8 years now, moving
Hmm.
close to 9 years. And that
Yep.
is go to wherever you're listening to podcasts and please give us an honest rating and review. If you love us, tell us you love us. If you hate us, I'll cry a bit, but probably get over it. The second thing is that one of the things I find is an awful lot of privately held business owners think their business is going to get them to retirement all by itself. And the truth is, maybe 0.3% of the
Hmm.
business in this country that will actually happen with, which
Right.
means that you need to have a strategy to get yourself become financially independent for your business. It's something I've been working on with business owners for years and years and years and years. And we developed a program called the Financial Freedom Accelerator. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about it, and I hope you do, you go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/freedom. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co/freedom. Read a little bit about it and set a time to chat with me for 20 minutes. I can guarantee that you'll get one idea that will move you closer to financial freedom after the conversation than before you started the conversation. So this is
Absolutely.
Josh Patrick. We're with Robert Silano. You're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.